Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about practice growth. It's the beginning of the year. I'm not sure whether it'll be January or February by the time you're listening to this, but many of us are setting goals and resolutions, and we're wanting to see more practice growth, more income growth as well. And today's episode, I want to talk with you about two of the big mistakes that I see practitioners make, and I'll talk to you about the solution to those and the foundation of where I think real sustainable growth is as well. So this one's going to be full of action items as well. So if you've got big goals for this year, then this will be perfect for you as well. Here's the first thing that I see that gets in the way of sustainable practice growth, and it's just this, is that practitioners are thinking that all that's between them and more income and practice growth is just harder work. Now, this is really tricky because hard work is definitely part of it. We'll talk about that at the end there too. So we love the idea of hard work. We see many really quite famous celebrity entrepreneurs, from Gary Vee to Grant Cardone, telling us all about the hustle, that we've got to work harder, that we've got to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week there too. And I remember getting a hold of one of Grant's books. I think it was called The 10X Effect or something like that. I read the first chapter, and basically what I took home from that is the only thing that was stopping me from reaching all my goals is that I wasn't working hard enough. Now, I never got past the first chapter because at that stage there, I was working 6 days a week and a lot of hours too. Now, maybe I could have worked 7 days a week. Of course I could have, and I could have worked even more hours. But I knew that what wasn't standing between me and growth, it wasn't a matter of working harder. I knew that I needed to do something different. Now, the challenge with this concept of working harder, for many of you, just working some more hours, just doing more, will end up with some practice growth. But we want sustainable growth. If you're going to end up burnt out, if you're going to end up resenting your work, your patients, the extra income, if you end up having not time with your family to look after your health, that's really not sustainable. So if the significant action item for you making 2021 a year of increased growth, both income and patient numbers, is all about working harder, I want you to kind of think twice about that too. Now, the example I often give to my coaching clients is that not only do we need to think harder, but sometimes we need to think smarter. So if I had to dig a really big hole in my backyard, I wanted to put a swimming pool in there, and I went out there with my shovel and I started digging, then I would have to work really, really hard for weeks probably to dig a hole that big. And then if some other clever entrepreneur came along and they had an enormous big digging machine, we call them a backhoe over here in Australia, then he or she would probably dig that same hole in half a day. Now, arguably, I worked harder. The other person worked smarter. They got better results in much less time there too. So part of, and we'll talk about this in part 3 in a moment, part of you reaching sustainable goals for your practice, income and growth-wise there too, is not just working harder. The second big mistake that I see, and I'm seeing this more and more recently, is that practitioners are confusing delegation with abdication. No, the other way around. Abdication with delegation there as well. Now, delegation is a really important part of practice growth. So if you're going to have more income this year, if you're going to have more growth in terms of all areas of your practice, then you can't be expected to do everything. You can't be answering the phone, doing the taxes, putting out the rubbish, cleaning all the tables. You can't be expected to do everything, particularly if you have really, really big goals, okay? But here's the challenge. As I mentioned beforehand, sometimes what we're doing, and I've been so guilty of this, what I've actually done is I've abdicated, not delegated. So there's a really important difference in the two there too. This is from howwelead.org. It's a great definition. The important difference between delegating and abdicating. When you delegate to somebody, you give them responsibility for something, but you stay in the information loop. Abdication is when you give somebody responsibility and then you disappear and you're not in the information loop. I've done this with my finances numerous times. In the early days with my accounting, I used to kind of just put it all onto my accountant, and I would speak with him maybe twice a year, but often just once a year when it was tax time. And I was always confused when there was a huge tax bill to pay or I needed to put money from one spot to the other. I didn't have time to do it. It wasn't until I started to have a two-way communication, whereas a relationship, where I realized that I couldn't abdicate this. There are some things I think that we shouldn't abdicate. I think our finances we shouldn't abdicate. The raising of our children, we shouldn't abdicate. Our important relationships, we can't abdicate as well. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be delegating. Now, I'm going to give you some tips of what delegation looks like in a moment as well. But basically, as I said before, delegation is about us staying in the loop. Now, the other area where I see delegation being done as abdication is when I speak with clients each and every week and they tell me that they've hired a marketing agency or a social media agency. They meet with them once, they handball it all to them, and then they wonder why they're not getting results 3 or 6 or 12 months down the track there. So it didn't work for me. Nobody knows and cares for your business like you do. You can't expect to handball that to me even as a coach. You certainly can't expect to hand that to a marketing agency. I couldn't expect to hand that to my accountant. And I wrongly assume just because I'm paying these people that they would be invested in the growth of my business just as much as I was. It's not going to be the case there too. So you can't just handball this all off and expect somebody else to do this. I think, as I mentioned before, marketing is one of those areas because nobody is able to, it's just a sidestep for a moment here too. Great marketing, a portion of it there is all about you. So you as the chiropractor, the naturopath, the dentist there as well. And somebody else, that means that you need to be showing up front of house. That means that your flavor needs to be running through it all. Now, you might find a great copywriter who can do some of that, but you need to be showing up to some extent as well. So if you're finding that there's areas in your practice that you're not getting the results that you should be or that you want to be getting, then I'd ask you to check in and do a little self-check. Am I delegating this to somebody or am I abdicating it? Now, one of my favorite books early on in my entrepreneurial journey was The E-Myth. And the E-Myth talks a lot about this. And I want to share just a few bullet points that they talk about in this book about what successful delegation looks like and some steps towards that. They say, first of all, identify a task that you want to delegate. Is it your marketing, your social media posting? Is it areas of your tax and financing? What part of maybe your practice communication could it be? Then what you need to do is you need to document the correct way to perform this task. Now, here's the challenge. If you don't know how to do it, and if you're not really clear about what the result is that you want, you cannot expect to handball this off to somebody else. I can't train one of my chiropractic assistants to answer the phone in the right way if I don't know what the right way is. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to be doing it all the time. It doesn't even mean that I have to be the best at it. In fact, it certainly means that many of the things that you will delegate, you're delegating because you're not the best at it as well, okay? But you do need to know what success looks like, and you do need to have a good understanding. So then you need to clearly specify the expected results. So what are the results that you're afterwards? You need to give information on the what, why, when, who, and how. Let me say that again. Clearly specify the expected result of the delegated task. Give information on the what, why, when, who, where, and how. So this is all clarity again. So again, when you've failed with your delegation, I'm going to suggest that you probably haven't given real clarity in around that. You're not sure about what the result actually is. Next, what you want to do is have somebody follow your action plan, maintain open lines of communication. Don't micromanage there as well, but make sure that you're kept in the loop on the progress and the performance. Then what you likely need to do is revise and update that document. Remember right at the top there too, when I talked about that definition between the two of them, it's that open information loop. I didn't have an open information loop with my accountant. I just expected him to do it all, and then I would check in with him once a year as well. When the new system document is ready, provide it to the employee responsible for that task, train them on how to successfully run the system, and insert a copy of this process document into your company's operation manual, okay? This would be the way that you could go about building an operation manual. If you don't have an operation manual now, then you can build it one task at a time, from everything from answering the phone to making an appointment to taking the cash to the way that you service your patients there as well. And then finally, you repeat these tasks, these steps on the next task there as well. The key thing when you're differentiating between delegation and abdication is open communication loop back and forwards there as well. And you not expecting somebody to do all of this, and because there is something excitement when we kind of handball something off to somebody else, but we need to keep those open communication loops as well. So maybe you're starting to think, what should you delegate and what shouldn't you delegate? Well, I want you to start by writing a list of the things that only you can do. Now, when I did this in my practice, I came up with basically two things: the adjustment itself, and even that, you'll see in a moment, I'm going to talk because my mind was even expanded a little recently about what I could and couldn't do there. So the adjustment and then parts of the initial consultation. So these are requirements for me here in Australia from my registration board. But there are parts of my initial consultation with new patients, the scans and the posture photos, that I have my staff absolutely do. But some of the history and the exam and those kind of things, it's a requirement that I do those as well. I used to think that I needed to do all of the adjustment, but I had a new coaching client come on recently who is a chiropractor, and he has a team of musculoskeletal experts that work with him who do all of the patient assessment, some of the treatment protocols that he goes through, and then he comes into the room and they'll say to him, look, you need to adjust C3, T5, L3 and L5, and he adjusts those and then moves into the next room. Now, you may want to do this, you may not. That's not the point. The point is I want you to think about what is it that only you can do. Now, there's another part of this too. One of the things that my mentors have taught me is that when you're delegating, you have to give up on the idea that the person doing it is going to do it to the same standard as you and or exactly as you. Now, we've got a list of how it needs to be done, but the suggestion often in lots of the reading that I've done is that if we can get somebody to do this task 70% as good as what we did it, then that's a really great baseline. Now, I think that's a good minimum. I like to kind of shoot for 80%, but anything less than that is not okay, certainly across my practices as well. So have a think about it. What are the things that only you can do? And everything else is totally open for delegation. So those two mistakes that we talked about, and then I'm going to talk about now what the solution is for those to do. Mistake number one is that we deny that we need to do anything else new, and that all we need between is more hard work. That's all that stands between, 20 or 21 being a fabulous year and it not as you actually working hard. And we talked about that's not the case there too. Mistake number two is really all about mixing up delegation and abdication. So if we're going to have 2021 be a year of great practice and income growth, here's what I think you need to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about developing new skills. I'm a huge fan of Dan Sullivan, business coach Dan Sullivan, not chiropractor Dan Sullivan. I'm a huge fan of that Dan as well. But the business coach Dan Sullivan has a quote like this. He says, the skills that got you out of Egypt are not the same skills that will get you to the promised land. In essence, the skills that got you to where you are right now are not the same skills that are going to have your practice and income grow this year. So you're going to need to get some new skills. Now, one of those skills we talked about before might be in learning how to delegate versus abdicate. Now, working out what skills you need to develop can be tricky. Some of you, as you're listening to this right now, will immediately know what it is that you need to work on in 2021. I've got a list here of kind of 9 components of running a business that might cue you to kind of think about some of the things that you might need to kind of look at. So let me go through those. One of the things or skills that you might need to develop to have practice and income growth is maybe just your financial management. Like I talked about beforehand, I was really bad with this in the early days. My relationship with my accounting, my budgeting, my saving, all of those things were terrible. I was earning an enormous amount of money, but none of it seemed to be there at the end of the year because I had really poor financial management. One of the skills that you might want to learn and develop this year is marketing and sales. We talked about the danger of delegating and abdicating this too. You need to have those skills yourself because nobody will be able to communicate your brand message in the way that you do. The third one that I've got down here is just communication. Do you need to get better at that? How are your communication in around the adjusting table, in the consultations, on the telephone calls that you're having, the communication that you're having with your staff? It can be an area of massive growth when you clean up your communication. How's your leadership? Leadership is one of those things that for 2021 is a priority for me. I'm going to be studying and reading leadership more and more because I want to be a better leader. I want to be going first. I want to be paving a pathway for my patients, and I want to be paving a pathway for you guys as well. I spoke in a previous episode, my story view about, the guy throwing the starfish back in there, that, this is not so much about saving the world for me. This is about serving the people that are in front of me right at that very moment. The book I'm reading at this moment here too is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, and I'm loving it. So I'm going to be studying a lot about leadership this year. Maybe for you it's project management. Do you find yourself starting projects but never finishing them? Do you get lost and overwhelmed? So if that's the case, then maybe project management is something you need to kind of work on as well. Delegation, time management. Time management was something that I spent a lot of time working on last year, and I'm going to continue with that this year. Looking for the areas in my day and in my week where I'm leaking a lot of energy, where I'm procrastinating, pretending to be working. I don't watch a lot of television and stuff like that, but I can tell you what, I can waste a bunch of time cleaning my desk. So that's something that I'll be continuing to work on. How are your problem solving skills? When problems come in front of you, do you shy away from those? Do you have good skills to be able to deal with problems? How's your networking? Is 2021, if you want practice growth there, a lot of that is about how many people know you, how many people like you, how many people trust you. Networking is a great way to get more know, like, and trust in your community. And then the 9th one I've got down here is headspace. Where's your head at the moment? Tricky times that we've got going on at the moment, and I don't know that they're going to change anytime soon. And we need to have first-class headspace for us to manage this. A growth mindset, a service mindset as well. These are things that we need to kind of work on as well. So let me quickly summarize those 9 things I put down there. Financial management, marketing and sales, communication, leadership, project management, delegation, time management, problem solving, networking, headspace. There are many other things that we could have broken this down to as well. Don't get bogged down. If there's not one of these that immediately stands out to you as something that you should be working on, then maybe chat with a loved one, chat with your staff at the practice. They will be a great person for you to ask. Many times if we ask those people around us, where do you think I'm lacking? What skills do I need to develop? How can I get better in these areas? Then often the people around us can be really helpful with that. Then next, head on over to Amazon. Look for the best-selling books, whether it be on project management or leadership. That's exactly what I'm doing with leadership there as well. And read them. Now, whether you're not into reading, then get the audiobook. If you're not into that kind of stuff, then YouTube now is one of the greatest sources of information there too, not just cat videos, but you can head on over there and look for training on leadership, project management. Or if you listen to this, you're clearly a podcast fan, go back to your favorite podcast listening app there and just do a search for podcasts on the area that you're wanting to develop in as well. So for your practice to grow this year, yes, you will definitely need hard work, but hard work alone is not going to give you sustainable practice and income growth. You will need to start to delegate and not be doing everything as well. Start with those tasks that are perhaps easiest for you to delegate, the ones that you can most quickly and effortlessly train somebody up from there as well. And then lastly, do an audit. What are the new skills that you need to learn for 2021 if you're to have that sustainable practice and income growth? Gang, that's it from me. They're the 2 big mistakes that I see people making. They're abdicating, not delegating. They're focusing on working too hard, and they're not learning new skills as well. Until next time, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. I'll see you back here real soon. Bye. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at addiomedia.com/join. That's addiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.